Tokens that double as food and rats are available now on etsy.com/shop/doodlesbycass. Hey hun, thanks for coming by. I just put a kettle on for you and I've got some brownies cooking in the oven. Help yourself right here, by the way. My name is Cass and this is the Sweet Serene Cemetery where I go over old and well-loved cards that you can use in your commander decks. Today we're cooking up something that you can bring to any casual table. I'm not sure if it'll help all of your opponents have a nice night, but it's sure to make for a delicious game for you, and sometimes the tears of our opponents are just the thing we need to wash down a good meal. So the most important ingredients we have are in the command zone, as any experienced chef knows. First of all, we have Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, and we have her paired with the background Agent of the Iron Throne. Now, I know that this background might have a little too much of a bitter kick for some people, but I think that it's just the thing that we need to offset Jaheira's overwhelming sweetness. She's just such a cutie patootie pie. So the general idea of this dish is to create these food tokens that we use in all sorts of creative ways. These little guys count as artifacts, and they can normally be sacrificed for the cost of 2 generic mana to gain you 3 life. However, as long as we have Jaheira out on the board for us, she turns them into effective ramp. You'll never run out of green mana as long as your commander here is out on the board. Once we do feel like getting rid of all of these food tokens, Agent of the Iron Throne will drain life from your opponents one at a time for each food token you sacrifice, and you'll be in a winning situation before you know it. Try and beat that with your hacky pie recipe, Becky. We also have a handful of treats that will reward you for stocking up on food tokens in the first place. I don't usually like to start off with dessert, but I think I should explain to you how nicely this deck can finish off the night for you and your friends. Or your enemies. Whoever you happen to bring to the table. There's a handful of ways that you can make infinite food tokens in this deck, and those will be helpful for any of our win conditions. The first ingredient you'll need is an artifact that taps to create another artifact. The 2 ingredients we have in our deck are the Underworld Cookbook or Summoning Station. We'll also need something that makes an additional artifact upon activation. We have a couple options for this: Peregrine Took, Academy Manufacturer, and Parallel Lives. Lastly, in order to make infinite food tokens, you are going to need a Clock of Omens. Let's look at one example of how this can come together. So let's say we have Peregrine Took, Clock of Omens, and Summoning Station on the board. First, we tap Summoning Station to make a little pincher guy. Peregrine sees this happen and also gives us a food token. How nice of him. Then we can use our Clock of Omens to tap the food and the pincher to untap Summoning Station and start it all over again. Once you have as many tapped foods and pinchers as you want, you can start sacrificing foods to Peregrine and draw your entire deck. From here, you should be able to find a win condition, or you can wait until your next untap step to swing in with infinite pinchers and just win the game with all of your funny little friends. They're a little unsightly, but they'll win you the game. They can attack. Here's how this combo can work with a couple different ingredients. Let's say that we have Underworld Cookbook, Clock of Omens, and Academy Manufacturer on the board. First, we tap our cookbook and discard to create a food token. Academy Manufacturer sees this happen and also gives us a treasure and a clue. From here, we can tap the food and the clue token to untap Underworld Cookbook and restart the process. This also gives you infinite untapped treasure tokens, so you have access to as much mana as you need, even if someone manages to remove Jaheira. But why would you kick her out of your table? Look at her, she's so sweet. Peregrine or Savvy Hunter also need to be on the board for this so that you can keep drawing and discarding to Cookbook. That's what makes it infinite. It's not as good of a combo as I thought, but there it is. If you happen to draw into Kuldotha Forgemaster instead of one of the artifacts that we talked about previously, you can sacrifice 3 food tokens, because we have so many ways of generating them, to find your missing piece. This will most likely be Clock of Omens, honestly. You just always want Clock of Omens. There's only one of them. Next, we have another way to draw through our entire deck with only 2 ingredients. For this, you'll need Peregrine Took, and at least one food token on the board, and an experimental confectioner in your hand. First of all, you're going to want to play the confectioner, creating a food token. Peregrine Took triggers and creates an additional food for you. You sacrifice those 3 foods to Peregrine and draw a card. Confectioner triggers, creating 3 rats because you sacrificed 3 foods. Peregrine Took triggers again, creating 3 additional food tokens that you can sacrifice to him, drawing you another card. This will let you draw as many cards and create as many rat friends as you want. You'll also have 3 foods on board when you choose to end the loop. This combo is especially sweet because with Jaheira on the board, infinite untapped rats also means infinite green mana, potentially, if you get to your next untap step.
Rats. We are the rats, celebrating yet another birthday bash. Michael, it's your birthday today. Cake and ice cream is on its way.
Once you find yourself in one of these card draw loops with Peregrine Took or Savvy Hunter, you can find and cast Pippin, Warden of Isengard from your deck, letting them tap for mana right away.
But actually, Cass, Pippin, Warden of Isengard, needs haste in order to activate his ability right away. It requires him to tap, so he needs to be on the field the turn before you start this loop.
Then you can find Marionette Master and cast it, or simply cast Agent of the Iron Throne from the command zone. This will drain everybody for at least 3 life every time you draw a card. After all, you spent all day brewing this up for everybody. You deserve to play with your food a little. Speaking of our delightfully salty, life-draining background, we have a bunch of other similar ingredients that can win us the game on the spot, provided you have enough foods on the battlefield. If it isn't already apparent, you're going to want to stock up on these tasty little morsels as much as you can throughout the game. It's tempting to crack them right away, but remember to save room for desserts. For this win condition, you're gonna need any card that drains life when your food tokens are sacrificed. This can be achieved with Marionette Master, Mirkwood Bats, Nadir Nightblade, or Agent of the Iron Throne. You'll also need any card that sacrifices food without paying its mana cost. Pippin, Warden of Isengard, Peregrine Took, Savvy Hunter, Reprocess, God Eternal Bontu, Malevolent Witchkite, and Lich King's Conquest are all cards that will help you accomplish this end. Lastly, you'll need 10 or more food tokens on the board. And the only step from there is to sacrifice all of your food tokens to the sack outlet. Alternatively, you could cast Second Harvest from your hand before sacrificing all of your food tokens to the sack outlet and draining out all of your opponents at the same time. How convenient. Just so tidy and clean, just the way we like it. Especially if you have Marionette Master on field, this will easily drain 40 life from all 3 of your opponents. And it can have some other fun side effects depending on which sack outlet you're using, such as drawing you 20 or more cards with Peregrine Took, Malevolent Witchkite, Bontu, or Savvy Hunter. You could potentially reanimate 20 or more creatures, which I think is everyone from the deck, from your graveyard onto the battlefield using Lich King's Conquest. Jaheira, Greta Sweet-Tooth Scourge, and Guillaume Master Chef can also potentially reduce the cost of sacrificing your food tokens, allowing for a more slow-roasted, gradual life drain, just in case you're missing these vital sack outlet pieces. If Sir Ginger Meal Ender or Mazarek Crawl Death Priest happen to be on the field while you're gorging your friends, they'll get filled up with so many +1/+1 counters that you could just gobble them right up. Or just swing in for damage, whichever one fits your fancy. They're gonna be so stuffed full of food tokens. They're gonna be so big and round and inflated that they can barely move. They're just gonna be so chubby that you could just eat them right up. Here's another quick treat for you that can easily take one of your opponents out of the game by making sure that they're nice and stuffed by all of your food tokens. You'll need a Monumental Corruption in your hand, and you'll have to satisfy one of the following conditions. Your opponent's life total needs to be less than the number of artifacts you control, or your opponent needs to have fewer cards in their deck than the number of artifacts that you control. This way, you can target someone else with Monumental Corruption, either draining their life on the spot or making them draw their entire deck before we politely pass the turn to them. Or if it's more cards than they have in their library, then they also just lose the game on the spot. Easy. This payoff is actually the reason why we have a few artifact lands in our deck. We have Dark Moss Bridge here, the Tree of Tales, and the Vault of Whispers. These are all three that we can use in our colors to make sure that we always have more artifacts than we need on our side of the battlefield. There are also some colorless artifact lands that we can include if we want to, such as Treasure Vault and Dark Steel Citadel. Vraska Golgari Queen is a 1-card win con if she has 9 loyalty and you can connect with just 1 creature. This is just an easy way to pick that last opponent off of the table and send them home for bed. Now that we know how your meal will be ending for the night, we're going to look at some other fun ways we can use these food tokens. We'll have to keep everybody busy at the table before we serve dessert as well. After all, everybody makes it to the dining room, but some people may need to tuck in a little early. First of all, we have a couple nice staple ingredients for any artifact deck. We have Nettle Cyst and Cranial Plating. These hardy ingredients will get stronger the more foods you stock up on, and Cranial Plating is a little bit sneaky since it can be swapped in onto an unblocked creature at instant speed as long as you have 2 black mana up. Next up, we have our friend Herald of Anguish, who can be cast for just 2 black mana if you have at least 5 food tokens on the board. He's a nice thick body with built-in removal, and he will make your opponents throw away their cards at the end of your turn. The earlier you get this overwhelmingly sour note onto your friend's place, the better. Karn, Scion of Urza, can immediately tick down to make artifact creatures that get stronger as you stock up on foods. Much like Nettle Cyst, he can make sure that your visitors are always entertained and busy through the early and mid game. Welcome to Sweet Tooth feels a bit slow and mellow, but it gets a body and a food token out before making your creatures nice and plump by giving them +1 counters equal to the number of food tokens that you have on the battlefield. Nice and big and round and inflated. Knight of Sweet's Revenge can be a delightfully spicy alpha strike and only needs 1 other ingredient to do it. As long as you have Jaheira and 6 food tokens out, you can immediately activate its ability and give your entire board +7/+7. That's sure to be a satisfying end of the night for at least a few of your dinner guests. Feasting Troll King essentially makes for a free ramp spell and a recurring 7/6 body if you have at least 7 food tokens on the battlefield. All of those green pips make this creature a perfect pairing with our commander. Now that we know what our game plan is, it's time to actually cook up the food. The rest of our deck is here to help you whip up these treats one at a time while skirting around any nastiness that your dinner guests might bring to the table. I'm looking at you, Becky. Don't even think about it. A bunch of our creatures can make food tokens over and over again, which is a vital part of our deck. These folks are working over that stove all night just to make sure that you can have a fun game. Galadriel, Gift Giver, gives you a food or helps your other creatures survive longer every time she attacks. Making treasures can be handy if you're really hurting for that black mana, but you'll typically want a food token since it gives you green mana anyway. Next up is Pippin, Warden of Isengard. Hopefully this little man will be making a food for you every turn with his tap ability. If our commander is around, those foods can pay for themselves after you make the first one. Next up is Scream Puff. Oh boy, spooky, huh? This big sweetie can trade for any of your opponent's creatures, so hopefully you can attack someone who doesn't want to block. I can't think of anything sweeter for our deck. Other than your dinner guests, of course. Speaking of guests, Rapacious Guest will reward you for swinging in with other creatures every time. She is a good payoff for when you eventually want to sacrifice your food tokens as well. Giant Skewer is an equipment that will reward you for playing the grindy mid-game. Pick your biggest critter and strap this onto it, and then every time they block, you also get a food token out of it. This could also be a good way to get some value out of a bad attack for you as well. Next, we've got our good friend, Tireless Provisioner. I think everybody knows him. You'll obviously want to choose food token every time you get a land drop, since treasures are only good for black mana in this deck. Here are some nice little shortcuts to making food as well. Sometimes your guests are in a little bit of a hurry to leave, and you just have to make sure that everybody stays to eat. Second Harvest doubles up on the food tokens that your opponents can see on your side of the board. I like to call this one the I made some the night before trick. As you can see here, right here. Some of our pieces also give us a smaller reward for making food in the first place. Like I always say, cooking is its own reward. Okay, maybe eating is pretty good too. Teething Wormlet is a great little guy to get out on the field early. He only costs 1 mana, but we get to see him grow up big and strong every time we create a food token. He'll also stave off the need for us to crack our food tokens earlier on in the game, since he continuously gains us life. Mirkwood Bats and Underhanded Designs will both slowly drain out your opponent's life every time you create a food token. Just because your table guests don't enjoy your cooking doesn't mean that you can't. Sarenth Steelseeker is also a great way to look at the top of your deck every time you create a food. He cares about artifacts entering the graveyard. It also serves as some easy ramp that you don't have to put effort into throughout the rest of the night. Chatterfang is an adorable little guy that can help us go wide and create a bunch of squirrel tokens while we're making food for everyone. I never understood why people thought these little critters were pests. Look at them. If you ever need to remove them, you can just use them as a removal spell. They're just about as sweet as a snack. Also, Tough Cookie can turn our food tokens into blockers whenever you need it. This will make sure to help you survive the mid-game or swing in, potentially, if someone at the table is looking like they need to hit the hay for the evening. Utility that also makes food tokens. Title. POW. Now, every deck needs a few different things. Mana and removal, and ours is no different. However, we do have some options for making these little food token treats on the way. Return from the Wilds is a great ramp spell that also comes with a food token. You could choose the human if you're really in a pinch, but I would only do this if you would die without having the blocker on board. Gilded Goose is always a welcome sight in any green deck. We'll be using this little cutie as a mana dork early in the game. Once you get the mana for it, you should start making those pretty little golden eggs every time you get the chance. Eleanor Gardner here packs her own food along with her, and you can sacrifice any food you have for land if you really need it, especially if you're drawing a lot of forests and you really need one of those duals or a black mana source. I just love how these hobbits always come prepared, you know? They've got the right idea about what's important in life. Bake into a pie sounds like a tough way to go, but it does make you a food for later. This should definitely come in handy if one of your guests is being a little bit too unruly for us. Stew the Conies should come in handy, especially with all the +1 counter effects we have in this deck. This is just another reason why it pays to help your creatures grow up to be big and strong. This one might come up as a little bit of a last resort, but Taste of Death will get rid of 3 things from everybody's battlefield. It's easily countered by token decks. On the upside, it does come with 3 food tokens for you, if nothing else. Oh, look at that, the tea is ready. I'll be right back. I just have to go run and grab that, and then... Oh, what do you mean you have to leave? You've barely touched the brownies I put out for you at all. Oh, not to your liking? You are far too polite for letting me ramble on like that. Would you rather have something savory? I also have gluten-free if you'd like. Oh, that's a shame. Well, you will stay for dinner, won't you? It's made with a special ingredient that is really hard to come by, and I would love if you did a taste test. Oh, don't be silly. We have all the time in the world. Oh, you look so tense. You should really sit back on the sofa and relax. Oh, hon. If I had known you were in such a hurry, I wouldn't have pressured you inside in the first place. I'm sure you understand that I've made extensive plans for tonight. I'm sure you'll stay for dinner. I think we're gonna have a beautiful evening. That's it. That's the deck tech. Let me know if you think foods are like a legitimately viable archetype in Commander. If you play them, I would love to hear about it. I'm really excited by all the support that they got in the Wilds of Eldraine set, and I've actually tested this deck out digitally a couple times, and it's pretty fucking fun. This deck list is linked in the description, down in the description, like usual. Go check it out if you feel like it, and yeah, please do let me know what you think of it. If you think it needs some cards that I forgot, you know, I take feedback. I'm not perfect. My ego isn't big and fat and round and inflated. If you like this video and subscribe to my channel, I will think that you're pretty cool. Ring the subscription ding dong bell. And my Etsy is etsy.com/shop/doodles by Cass. You can buy some of these cards there. This food token here, I made that. This little gay bunny, I drew those gay bunnies. Yeah, thanks for watching till the very end. Tell me in the comments what your favorite dessert is. Mine is a decaf coffee and a big peanut butter cookie. Good night, happy Halloween.